Hello, everyone else. As Laura said, my name's Ben. I'm Benjamin Cole, and I'd like to start by thanking Drs. Werner and Bell for their talks. I'm here today in my capacity as the newest member of the newchristianbiblestudy.com project team. That's also NCBSW. We'll be referring to it by that. And I'm here to introduce our project team lead, Steve David. Steve is the CEO of Skymark Corp, which is a software development company out in Pittsburgh. And in 2011, he and his brother Brian launched this project, this site that you're seeing up here behind me, New Christian Bible Study, NCBSW. And I think that name's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to be telling you a little bit more about that site. And Steve was planning to tell you today about how this project is attempting to lift the basket off of the lamp that is the heavenly doctrine as revealed through Swedenborg. And I say he was planning because unfortunately he had to leave the country to be with his wife's family. Her father recently passed into the spiritual world. And as a result, I will be filling in for him as your only non-doctorate speaker today. And if Steve had been talking, he'd even have an MBA and had graduated from Yale, but I can't claim any of that. I'm sorry. Again, I'm Benjamin Cole. I'm the newest addition to the NCBSW team. I attended the ANC secondary schools, and I graduated from the college here in 2012 with a BA in religion. And I was focused on sacred languages, which is why I was sought out by Steve to help with this project, to be his Latinist, to help with Greek and Hebrew. And Steve wanted to title this talk, What's This Basket Doing Over Our Lamp? And speaking of lamps, I'd like to start with an apocryphal anecdote, which is commonly called a joke. In most versions of this story, a police officer on his evening patrol spots a man searching under a street lamp, and he's obviously drunk. The man, not the street lamp. So instead of citing him for public intoxication, which is, I think, decent of him, the kindly officer asks what the man is searching for, and the man explains that he dropped his keys. So the officer stops to help him for a few minutes, and after looking for a while, the officer says, "Are you sure this is where you dropped your keys?" And the man says, "No, I dropped them in the park." And the officer says, "Well, why are you looking here?" And the man says, "Well, this is where the light is." Yeah. So this anecdote, this story illustrates a phenomenon. Let's get that back up. Illustrates a phenomenon called the streetlight effect, or the drunkard search, which is actually a studied phenomenon. The term was coined by a journalist, but it was initially brought up by a philosopher who studied the social sciences and behavioral studies. And he uses this story to illustrate the behavior of intelligent people. It sounds ridiculous when, referring to a drunkard, wandering around looking for his keys, maybe a quarter mile from where he may have dropped them. But this is something that we actually see researchers doing in studies. It's a way of explaining how their data may have been faulty after the fact, why their studies didn't turn out the way they maybe should have, is they were looking for their answers not where they should have been, but where it was easiest to find them. So back to missing keys for a moment. Does somebody here have a set of keys that they'd be willing to let me hold on to? Set of keys? I don't have mine on me, I'm afraid. Joey has mine. Oh, here we go. Here's a set of keys.
What is it?
Let me put them here. And I brought this with me. This is, I think, several copies of most of the published works of Emanuel Swedenborg. This is our lamp. To start with, I'm going to grab the 12 volumes of Arcana Celestia. This is 12 volumes in English. In Latin, it's only 8. That's volumes 1 through 5 or so. here I am. Here's Heaven and Hell. I've got miscellaneous theological works. I've got Divine Love and Wisdom. And the point I'm trying to illustrate is, here we have our keys, and here we have these books. Now, most of the people in this room, looking for truth in these books is not a huge hurdle. We're familiar with these books. We know how to find truth in these books. But for most people, there are 30-odd published works in Swedenborg's theological period. And those, we know how to look for truth in those. But for most people, 250-year-old books in more than 30 volumes is a huge hurdle. People don't know how to find truth in those. And these are just the published works. And I want to touch on the Christian world. We have 2.2 billion people looking for truth in the Word. That's a huge number. That's a third of the world's population who are looking for truth in the Word. And if you're in this room, most of you might say that they're not seeing all the truth that's in there. And the new church, people who look to these books for truth on a regular basis, has maybe 10,000 members worldwide across all of its branches. And if you want to expand that number to all of the people who may have heard of Swedenborg and may have read part of maybe one of these books that I have over here, then that's about 0.0045% of the Christian population who has glimpsed some little tiny sliver of that light. How are we going to reach them? We have a lot of truth to share with them, and how they're not getting that truth. At this point, I'd like to tell you about my experience as a student. As I said, I graduated from the college in 2012, which is a year after this site was launched. And because I wasn't aware of this site, for a few years after it was launched, I can't tell you what it was like back then. But I can tell you that in my studies as a religion major, I used several sites that this site fills that niche now. And I say several sites. I use several sites at the same time. I'm going to apologize to you for those of you for whom computers were not readily available when you were students. But for me, especially when I was changing my study location several times a day, I couldn't lug all of these books around with me. I couldn't be bringing several translations of them. I couldn't be bringing a translation of English to consult various translators. I couldn't be bringing the Latin with me, or several versions of the Bible. But I know that for some of you, you had to do that. We're making great strides in making it much, much easier for people to access this, and all at once. When I was a student, I would use a site called BibleGateway.com. It's the first website that comes up when you search for Bible in Google. And it's a great site because it contains many translations. You can consult all the different versions of it, and you can look at them side by side. Bible Gateway has, I think, over 200 translations of the Bible in nearly 80 languages. And this site that I'm about to show you, New Christian Bible Study, we have over 100 translations across 60. They've got a pretty big lead on us, but they've been around for 18 years longer than we have. I'd say that's a pretty good catch-up. So I'm going to show you around the site a little bit. As the first site to try and offer that range of flexibility of a site like Bible Gateway, and there are many others, right alongside the Heavenly Doctrine of Swedenborg. So here's our homepage, which is fairly easy to look at. And the first place you might want to go is to read the Bible, especially if you're a user who's familiar with something like New Christian Bible Study. You want to have the capabilities that site offers. So the default version, it gives you the King James Version, the most widely read translation into English. And like many of the other sites, you can bring up other translations, not just one at a time, but you can look at them side by side. It looks like there's our connection. We've got Young's literal translation right by the side if you want a more literal version. And on top of that, you can look at the Hebrew at the same time. There are sites that offer this type of a function. You can look at them all beautifully side by side. If you want to look at just one verse at a time, you can just click on the verse and it'll come up. Here we've got verse 1 in the King James translation, Young's literal, and Hebrew. And now that I've collapsed Genesis chapter 1 into just the first verse, you can see what's down below. This would have been below if it was the full chapter as well. And we have a commentary on the creation story. And if I bring that up, it's going to replace one of my translations because we don't want 4 tiny little slivers. So we've got a commentary. I believe this one was by Brian David, Steve's brother, who helped him found this site. In all of these commentaries, you can look at the bibliographic information to find out where we got it. No, this one is from a sermon by David Roth, used with permission. So we pull that back. So we have the Bible, we have commentaries on the Bible, and if I get rid of a couple of these so we can have a wider view of them, if it's going to load for me, I can look at, I can scroll to the bottom and look at the passages where Swedenborg explains this chapter. And I can select any one of these and look at that side by side with it. And on top of that, we've got a variety of translations as well. And now this here is one of our biggest areas for potential growth. You see French listed under there. And there's nothing listed just yet, but we're working on it. The next thing I want to show you, though, is you notice that a lot of these words are highlighted in blue. They're little hyperlinks. If you click on these words, you get a brief explanation of what it is. Vacuity. These explanations are from Nicholson's explanations in 1800, and he gives you an Arcana reference where Swedenborg explains this, where details what a void is. And if you want to look at a whole range of terms as they show up in the Bible, you can look at Bible word meanings under the Bible tab. Now, for most of us, we're somewhat familiar with the heavenly doctrine, so we know where to look for these things. But for people totally unfamiliar to this, having this in small portions, if you just want to understand what is happening in the internal sense while you're reading the literal sense, it makes it really easy to look at those side by side, right over top of it. Now, my connection has slowed down drastically since when I tested this, but on this internet connection it's not showing up, but at home it pops up in just a moment. I have a huge list of terms that occur in the Bible, or the Word, and you can select them and read explanations. You can find passages from the Arcana that explain where that comes from, and it's still not showing up. So let's just move on for now. We've got a similar type of explanations for spiritual topics, less terms as they occur in the Bible, but ideas as they occur in the internal sense. And if we look at one at correspondence, if it's going to show up for me. Yep, here it is. We've got an excerpt of text. Again, we can look at the bibliographic information to find out who wrote this text originally, but it's either a sermon from a new church minister somewhere. And along the side, we have videos borrowed from the Swedenborg Foundation. They're Curtis Childs' Off the Left Eye videos. And I can tell you they're 1 minute, beautifully illustrated explanations of new church principles. One of the newer things we've added is under Swedenborg's works, we've added the Latin grammar search, Neo Search. Now this is software that's been around for since 1995, but not used very widely. It's never been on the internet before for anyone to use. And it looks like it's not going to show up for me. I tested this out right before coming up here, and the connection is no good. NeoSearch is a way.
It's the snow.
Yeah, it must be the snow. Yep. It's blocking off my internet signal. That's how that works, right? NeoSearch is a Latin grammar search. It's a way of searching the heavenly doctrines in Latin for terms that occur there. And it's a really powerful tool. I really wish I could show it to you. I wonder if it'll show up if I... Yep, here it is. So right on our site we have this little function. It's not showing up on our site, but I can go directly to the NeoSearch tool itself as a standalone. And you can read a little information about it. It says it's an alpha test version, which means it's really early, it's still really buggy, and we're working out the kinks of it. But you can see it's been around for a long time. We have the people who originally developed the software listed down here at the bottom. Joshua Schnarr helped us get it into its current form on the site. But it's a really neat tool, and I'll show you a little bit of what it can do. So if I search for the beginning of a Latin word, amo, that's a stem of a Latin word, it'll give me any occurrence of amo. Now it's a little bit buggy, as you can see right now. I've only got 17 hits. I can tell you amo in all of its forms occurs a lot more than 17 times in the whole heavenly doctrine. If I look for it as a verb, though, I can tell it specifically to look for verbs, and then I get any form of amo as it shows up as a verb. And since it's still buggy, it looks like several forms that are obviously not verbs as well. So here I am demonstrating the flaws of a program with a ton of potential. Like I said, it's still an alpha test version. You can add multiple terms to see where they occur near each other. Non-verb, and you can, well, it failed on that one. And you can say how close you want those words to occur. Let's see if that shows up with anything. It's fairly unpredictable in this stage, but we're hoping to get people using it and reporting exactly what's not working, so that we can get this into a form that anyone can use, any Latin scholar can use. So that's a neat thing that I'm excited about. We just put that up last month. Another thing that's neat for newcomers to the new church is find Christian groups. So if anybody is looking for truth in the Word and stumbles across this site and finds interesting explanations and they want to find other people to talk to, we have a world map for them of all the places in the world where there are new Christian groups. That's a little bit zooming in and out like that. And you can find any type of organization. You can find, narrow your search to a specific branch. And you get all the little flags all over the world where you see these groups, and they're color-coded based on the type of organization. And lastly, I want to show you a part of a little bit about where our project is going from here. One of the latest things we're working on is translations. I just showed you how to get there on the site. I was in site, project blog, and then the second most recent post right now is update on the matrix. And if you follow that link, you'll get to the page that I handed out for you. It's impossible to read on this site, hence the handouts. But I can zoom in a bit, and you see it takes a potentially daunting task of translating the heavenly doctrine into all of the world's most spoken languages so that people can reach them in a way that they can read. And it quantifies it and makes it a much less daunting task. It explains to you exactly how you can find, exactly how we should go about this project. It's color-coded, but I think we got it printed out in color. We've got this coral color, which means that we've got a web-based Bible translation. That means the Bible's on the internet in that language somewhere. So you'll see all of these languages here with the color coding. And then as we have Swedenborg's works listed over here, it tells you what state that translation is in. And as you can see right now, the green color coding for TW means that there's a translation on the web in a granular database form with references hyperlinked. There's a lot of technical jargon that really just means it's in a form that is either already on our site or easily put on our site. And the only two languages that are fairly thorough are English and Latin. And you can see there are very few green boxes. We've got a couple in French. It looks like we've got a few in, just one in Korean, one in Norwegian, a partial in Portuguese, and then two full. But it shows exactly what needs to happen to get those languages, those translations of the Heavenly Doctrine online in a way that people can read them. And there's little asterisks across the top marking certain languages, which means that there are speakers of that language who are interested in reading Swedenborg target languages. So those are active new church people, somewhat already translated, and a significant audience to have that in their native language. This is a really exciting page for me to look at. So let me try to share a little bit of my excitement for that. Because it takes that daunting task and quantifies it. Getting these onto the internet is a way of putting them somewhere where anyone in the world can access them, even if they don't have access to a hard copy translation. Yes, Mr. Nevis?
What does TWP mean?
That means translation is on the web, but it's only partial. So that's Arcana Celestia. I know Arcana Celestia in Portuguese only exists partially translated on the web somewhere. I think we may have that partially on our site. So in a day of intellectually stimulating talks, I'm afraid my subject matter may have come across a little bit more focused on outreach. But instead of focusing on reaching out, why can't we make the Heavenly Doctrine something the world will want to reach for? How do we do that? They haven't reached for it over the past 250 years, and I don't think it's for lack of wanting to. Christianity, like I said earlier, has the most adherents of any religion worldwide, nearly a third of the world's population. So there is plenty of interest in the Word of God, but are people finding all the truth in it? Is that lamp illuminating the place where they drop their keys? In the new church, we believe that the lamp is obscured for many, and we know how to uncover it, but how do we get that to the world? As less than half of 1/100%, that's the new church world. What did I say? 1/100? 1/1000% of the whole of Christianity. We owe it to the world to get this out there, and we can make it easier for them to find the internal sense while reading the Word. And we can do this, like as I show you, in all of the major languages of the world. We can do it in a comfortable and secure place where readers have the opportunity to interact with each other. And this seems to be the method that the Swedenborg Foundation is following, and we're hoping to follow in their footsteps. So a little bit of the history of this site. In 2014, we had 150,000 people visit our site. In 2015, that number shot up to 468,000. And this coming year, who knows? It could continue to grow. Thank you. Yes?
Thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if it's possible, even if the Swedenborg Foundation has started working on reaching out to the Muslim community and perhaps finding forms, correspondences, degrees that would, I think it's a spiritual and perhaps even a military imperative. I'm just wondering if the Swedenborg Foundation has considered that.
I'm not a spokesperson for the Swedenborg Foundation, so I can't tell you what efforts they've made on that. That is definitely an interesting consideration. Do I have any other? Mr. Nevins again.
I think I got to know that in
is
Mhm.
represented in Ghana and West Africa.
That's right.
They said there's a huge representation there.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, in Ghana. I was wondering, when it is translated, the language of Ghana, why is it not
Yeah, I'm not seeing, is it,
there's Yoruba. Yoruba is in Nigeria. And there's also Zulu.
are you looking for Twi?
Tui. Why is it Tui is not there?
I don't know, I can't tell you.
Because in West Africa, Ghana is a major country.
Absolutely. You know, it's possible that that hasn't been made an imperative because English is commonly spoken there, but I really can't, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll definitely be talking to Steve about that, asking him about that. And Mr. Nemitz, I believe.
Well, this is such a positive thing that's happening. Do you happen to know what parts of the world are generating the most? Two questions. What parts of the world are giving the most responses? And secondly, is there any way in which we can go find out who these people were, make some contact with them so that we can draw them into a communication with us?
Right. I think one of the reasons we're getting so many hits on our site is we leave it so open-ended. We're not trying to snare anybody who's visiting. I think we may have some data on on where all those generated hits are coming from. I don't know how to look for that myself. I'm just a Latinist. I'm not a programmer. Steve would probably be able to tell us where we're getting the most hits throughout the world. And we're trying to make it easy for these people, like I showed you the map, to find new Christian groups if they're interested. And I believe part of the future for our site is to have more user interactivity. Right now, since I have a sign-in, and not only do I have a sign-in, I've got admin abilities. I can look, behind the curtain of the site. But any users, and it's fairly easy to set up a profile, can bookmark pages, make notes, and I hope that we'll have an interactive forum where people can talk to each other on our site soon. That's not something we have up yet, but I believe that's in the works. That's a priority.
Very good to hear.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Yes.
I wonder sometimes about profanation.
Mhm.
Protecting all of us from accepting profanation. I don't know if there's a time, but
Right. She was asking about profanation, protecting the world from accepting. That it reminds me of the story in Revelation, the woman clothed with the sun and hiding in the wilderness for a time and half the times. And it certainly seems like she's been hiding in the wilderness for a long time, and we can get pretty impatient about that. And I'm sure that divine providence there's a reason for that. That the new church is still in obscurity for the moment to protect that profanation, or protect from that profanation. But that doesn't mean we can't try and share the light with people.
But it is a topic to think about.
Absolutely. And Dr. Bell?
Well, just have a statement. I came here in 1990 and to be a teacher and to go to the theological school. And in the late 80s, there were some people that had this vision of this. And at the time, there was kind of a sort of a proto-internet. Nobody knew how it worked. And it didn't do much compared to now. And computers were becoming more powerful. I remember when I first came here, they were struggling to digitize the writings. And they were full of mistakes. And we were worshiping a cod for a while, and then we found out it was really God. So we didn't want to worship a fish anymore. And I just remember those days because it was such plodding work. And it seemed like we were so focused on these minutiae, but there were a few people around here who really saw this. They saw it. It was in front of them. And so I just want to think, that's not long. We've done some really good stuff here. And yes, our light is under a bushel, and we're small, and we're 1/1000000000 of a percent. But this is the work, not to take away from you guys now, but this is the work of visionary people. And if we don't have visionary people, nothing happens. And so I would just applaud you for all you're doing, because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And that's an important point I think I forgot to make, is that we don't want to say we're the only people doing this. We have here at the bottom links to all the other people who have helped out in trying to get the word out there in various forms. We've got the Kempton Project down here. I believe you were talking about the Stairs Project.
Yes.
Stairs, we've got them linked right here. It brings you to heavenlydoctrine.org. And this is one of the, like I said, one of the tools that I was using when I was a student, is heavenlydoctrines.org. Great way to search for the writings. Right now, I think they only have it in English and Latin. So we're trying to offer that in more variety, but we're definitely standing on the shoulders of giants to get this done.
And you're still doing it. That's
Mhm.
wonderful.
Absolutely. And we have them all, we have our giants, the shoulders we're standing on down here at the bottom. Anyone else? All right, I think that concludes our questions.